the day we lost her was full on and intense. I mean, duh, she died. It's not exactly going to be a rock and roll concert, is it? But that day, and the interesting thing about this is it's been 23 years, 24 years. So bad I can't even remember now. I'm starting to lose the years. But you'd think, lost it. What's I saying? Oh yeah, the day. Oh yeah, you would think that maybe the memory of that day starts to fade. Pardon me. But it doesn't. It doesn't fade. It's just as fresh as it was the day after it happened, And I remember because that week, and I touched on this in episode 2, right? My parents and I were very different, especially my mum and I. We were at loggerheads quite often in life. That lessened in the 2.5 years since I'd become a mother, which was pretty cool. I think I started to understand her more and she understood me more. And we had a common thing to connect over. But we were very different people. Plus I was younger, but she was very methodical and perfectionist, and things were done this way and and very right and wrong. And I'm not. I'm the opposite. Anyway, we were very different. Yes, we were. We were very different. Now, I didn't drive. I didn't have a car. And this particular week, well, not this week, previous to this, I had brought my daughter and my groceries home in a trolley. The supermarket was not far from home. And I'd walked them home, and I had yet to take the trolley back, had every intention of taking the trolley back, just hadn't taken the trolley back yet. It had now been 3 weeks. Dad had come round on the Wednesday of this particular week to mow my lawns for me, which was amazing. And he did that regularly for me, which was great. Anyway, I got a phone call from Mum after he left because Dad was very pissed off that I had not taken this trolley back. And Mum had rung me, and we ended up having a massive blow on the phone because she was like, "You've got to take the trolley back. It makes you a thief." And I was like, "No, it doesn't make me a thief. It just makes me probably lazy because I haven't taken it back yet. But I'm taking it back." And I just got really upset and angry because it just felt like they weren't trusting me, right? They weren't believing me and they weren't trusting me. So we have this big fight over the phone. I hang up on her, probably swore at her. I don't know, but we had this massive fight. We didn't talk on the Tuesday, and we talked fairly often. They lived down the road from me. I was there mostly every day. I helped them run the restaurant. While Mum was sick, we were very involved in each other's lives to a certain degree. Anyway, didn't talk to her on the Thursday. Dad rang me on the Friday morning. Now, Dad was working at Moore Wilson in Wellington, and he would catch the train into town and catch the train home again. Sometimes, not always, but most of the time. They didn't live far from the train station. He would take his car, leave it there, etc. A lot of people in Wellington do this. So he did this, and to do this, he'd have to leave very early in the morning, like 5:30, whatever. So he rings me at like 5:30, and he said, "Look, Mum had a really bad night." I said, "Okay, I will get up. I will get Taylor together, and I'll be over there." So I remember walking over to the house. It was still dark. Maybe it was 6:30 in the morning. Taylor was all wrapped up. I mean, it was summer, so it wasn't so bad. It was December 2002, I believe. And so it wasn't cold exactly, it wasn't like the middle of winter or anything. So off we go, and we get there, and Mum was in bed, and Dad had packed a cooler box with food and stuff right next to her. And I got there, and she wasn't good, but we managed to have a little conversation. And I didn't realize at the time that it would be our last conversation. And she was apologizing to me. And we'd kind of got to make peace, but we didn't get to have a conversation about it per se. We didn't get to work it out. And I just remember the morning going on, and I just remember regularly checking on her, sitting with her, and she just deteriorated so quickly. She went from being able to kind of talk to not being able to talk at all. To not even being really able to get up out of bed. And I remember going, "This is not good." And I didn't ring Dad or whatever because, he'd called me to take care of her. So I was taking care of her. So I rang my friend Liz at the time, who still happens to be my friend. And she was also a nurse. She was a nurse at Wellington Hospital at the time. And I said to her, hey, I think I should call hospice. Like, this is the situation. So she's like, yeah, we're going to call hospice. So she came over to call hospice. So we called hospice, and I don't know how long, but they came in anyway. And then it all went really fast from there. It went really fast from there. I remember them saying, look, where is everyone? I was downstairs making sandwiches. I think they'd actually already said to me, hey, look, it's not going to be long. And I think I just sort of made up in my head, assumed in my head that meant a couple of days, right? And I didn't really think to clarify. I said, oh, okay, well, I'll go downstairs and make lunch for everyone, right? So, which is the kind of thing Mum would have done. So I went downstairs, I was making lunch for everyone, and a nurse comes downstairs and she says to me, where is everyone? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, where's your dad? Where's your brother? And stuff. I was like, well, they're at work. I said, oh, Dad will be home at like 1, and my brother will be home. She goes, no, you need to call them now. And I said, now, as in to come home now? I thought we had like a couple of days. She goes, no, you might have the night, but you might only have a few hours. So panic ensued, and I rang Dad, and I couldn't get hold of him. And I don't think he even had a cell phone in these days. I'm not sure. I actually can't remember. And I think he was already on his way home, but he was in between. I think he was on the train, so we couldn't get hold of him at work. He was on his way home. And I think Liz's husband, Sam, had driven into town to try and catch him at the train station, because Dad used to walk from the train station to Moore Wilson and back, you know. And so Sam worked in town, and I think he rushed off to try and go in, or he worked in, it doesn't matter. Anyway, he went to go and try and find Dad in town, couldn't find him. I think when we finally got hold of him, he had arrived back in Lower Hutt, and he came home, and he got upstairs, and he sat next to Mum, and he held her hand. And Mum wasn't talking at this stage. They didn't even get to have a conversation. I remember finding my brother and getting hold of my brother, and he came home. He walked into the kitchen. He put a drink in the fridge or something. He went straight upstairs, and within a couple of minutes of him being upstairs, maybe 5 or less, I just had this urge. I was going to leave, initially, I was going to leave them up there with her, because I'd been with her all morning, and I was like, they need some time with her. But I got this overwhelming feeling to go upstairs. And as I walked upstairs and went and lay on Dad's side of the bed, so Dad was round next to her on her side, holding her hand. My brother was at the foot of the bed. I climbed on the bed on Dad's side and grabbed her hand. And the minute I grabbed her hand, I heard Dad say, she's going, she's going, she's gone. And all hell broke loose. All hell broke loose. I remember getting up. Off the bed. And I went to go downstairs because my brother had run out. And he had gone outside, and I think we'd heard him punch the rubbish bin. And I just remember the noise of the rubbish bin flying. And I know it was only full of grass clippings, but this thing flew like meters. And he was my younger brother, so I went to run after him. And I got to the stairs, and my knees just collapsed, fully gave out from underneath me. And I just remember hugging the stair, the rails. The rails, and just crying, and Dad was in the room and he was crying. And I don't really remember much after that. Well, I do, but I mean, there was a point there, I think my friend came down and she was hugging me. I don't really know. It was just all a blur from that point on. And, then, because there were doctors behind her, there were nurses, there was my mum's best friend. She had arrived in time, and there's, when she died, there were all these people around. And then whatever time after that, all these people were gone. And it was just, my brother had taken off, and it was just me, my dad, and my daughter now in the house. And the house was so quiet. And it was weird because it was kind of like this, things went back to normal. Mum was still in the bed. I called the funeral home, and they said, we're going to be a while. We can't get there straight away. I said, okay. So Mum lay there, and I remembered Mum saying to me, now, just remember that she had grown up and lived in South Africa until she was 41. So, you know, certain habits were hard to let go. And she had said to me one time, not long before the end, when we had been going to get her medicine, she said to me, promise me that when I die, you'll take all my jewelry off. I don't want to be cremated with my jewelry on because it won't go with me. Someone will bloody nick it. Right? She was convinced, convinced that someone was going to nick it. So I said, fine, I'll take it off. And I was not prepared. I was not prepared for what was going to happen next. And I don't think anyone could. How could you be? Like, yes, I'd been to school, and yes, I knew about rigor mortis, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, I knew about this. I didn't know when it set in. I didn't know how long. I didn't know any of that, you know? I'm not a freaking mortician. But I knew that my mum wanted her jewelry taken off, and I was going to make sure that her wish was honoured. So I took her rings off. But what I wasn't prepared for was the fact that her fingers were now stiff, and I couldn't really bend them and move them to get these rings off. And not to mention that, but her fingers were full of fluid and all the rest of it as well. So I ended up having to get soap and oil and all these kind of things to take her rings off. And I just remember just saying to her, I'm so sorry, Mum, like she was sleeping, right? Like she was sleeping. Mum, I'm so sorry. Then I'm so sorry. I'll try not to hurt you. I'm so sorry. And then my brain in the next moment going, dumbass, she's dead. She ain't feeling a thing. Right? It's just the weirdest thing. And then I remember Dad was emailing people and ringing people, and I was ringing people, and we were making a list of everyone that we had to let know that she was gone. And, you know, all her family were in South Africa. My grandmother, her mother was still alive. My mum passed away before she did. None of the family could make it out for the funeral. Then we just had to kick into gear, and we were organising her memorial service and all the rest of it. And, you know, that week went fast. And then after that, it's like everything just came to a thud, to a halt. Everything just stopped. And it was just like, well, now what? And that's when the void of her not being there was massive, because she was the glue of our family. And I remember her saying to me, promise me that you will keep, right? Promise me that you will keep your father and your brother, our family, together, right? Because she had been that glue. And my father and my brother have always had a strained relationship, and they never really got on in our family. I was daddy's little girl, and he was mummy's little boy, kind of thing. Those were the dynamics. And I said to her, yes, of course. I had no idea what I was agreeing to, right? Why would you? So I said, yes, of course I will. And I just had no idea how much saying yes to that promise was going to impact me. I really didn't. But with that, that's pretty much the story.